amplified. What I really would like to emphasize is that we are working currently with over 100 media outlets in the 6 countries of the Western Balkans. And what we're finding is that the state of play when it comes to women being present in media and in the content is really quite worrying. Now, I won't go into the details of the statistics because you know them better, but practically our research has confirmed that although there are many, many women journalists, 60% on average, in terms of content, they are there less than 1/3 of the time as subjects and less than 1/5 of the time as objects of stories. But then also, we have conducted a whole series of activities and we are trying to see what works best to strengthen the position of women. And in addition to research, we have done training on gender equality in media and also on safety of women and men in journalism. And what really struck me was the stories you have shared with us, how important it is to have safe spaces to actually discuss the violence that you're experiencing and the discrimination and all the really challenging things, which basically, from what I'm gathering, you don't have sufficient opportunities or networks or support to share. And this is why this talk is really, really important, because we want to encourage women around the region and locally to network and to come together in solidarity in order to actually tell your stories. Because normalizing violence of any sort is not acceptable. You know this better than I do, but unfortunately it is present and we will hear more of that today. And one final thing I would like to add is that we would really like to advocate for introduction of policies and standards which will actually help protect the status of women in media in general from the starting point. I know many of you are working for small media outlets, even some of you are working as freelancers, but still this is no reason why not to introduce policies in countries, in media outlets and across the region, because we have found that only a very, very small proportion of media outlets have gender-related policies, and we're also finding that they're needed in order to improve the state of play on the ground. Also, if you're interested, we have the risk safety matrix, which has been developed as part of our training. I think my colleague Leila, who's leading on our gender work, can share this with you together with our BIRN partners. And I really look forward to hearing what you're going to get started today. So thank you all very much, and I will see more of you at another point. Thank you. Sofia, you're muted.
Sorry. I said thank you, Leila, for introducing us with the project and all its aspects. So I think that if we are all good, I think that we can start now. So I will just briefly present today's panelists by saying their names, and I will leave the floor to them to tell you something more about themselves, their work, basically, and their background. So today on this very important topic, we will discuss with Zhaklin Lekatari. Zhaklin, just say hi so the people can.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you.
With Dafina Halili.
Hi.
After Dafina, we have today with us Natalija Miletic.
Hi, everyone.
And Jelena Jovanovic from Montenegro. Okay, so basically, then maybe Zhaklina can start. Zhaklina, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zhaklin Lekatari. I'm from Albania, Tirana. I'm a journalist. I'm a human rights activist and sex ed blogger. So I'm doing this for 5 years now in Albania, and I think also in the Balkan. And that's what basically what I do. I advocate for human freedom, but also the sexuality freedom. So my work is very, very hard because all the topics I talk about are taboo topics here, not only in Albania, but I think also in the Balkans. I cover up also Kosovo, because all my followers, most of them are from Kosovo and Albania. And I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it, but it's really, really hard sometimes. Thank you.
Zhaklina, I think that now we can go to Dafina.
Yes.
I'm Dafina. I am a journalist based in Pristina. I'm from Kosovo. I work for Kosovo 2.0 for 6-7 years now. And probably there are also many people that follow us already heard of Kosovo 2.0 because we have like a wider regional audience since we publish in 3 languages, in Albanian, in English, and also in Serbian. And we are much more focused into more slow type of journalism, in kind of like explanatory multimedia journalism, and with a lot of focus on social justice and human rights, actually. And I am a part of the team that is much more focused on covering human rights, particularly women's rights, LGBT rights, and minority rights. When it comes to minorities, I widely covered particularly Roma community, Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian communities in Kosovo. And I also had the chance to deal a lot with wartime stories and also wartime gender-based violence and wartime rape. So more or less, this is like my profile of work and also the organization where I work.
Thank you, Dafina, very much. And now Natalija Miletic.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Berlin. So I'm Natalija, and I am a freelance journalist. I have to say that since I'm the only panelist from Serbia, if I understood correctly, I have to say that I don't have much experience working in Serbia. I did, of course, cooperate as a freelancer with many Serbian media, but I guess I will giving just like my observational perspective when it comes to all the issues that we mentioned. However, I have participated or I work with many international media here in Germany, and I have also participated in some big all-female media project, so I guess I could share my story on that as well. And I'm also an activist, and I was involved in some interesting actions when it comes to the Metoo Serbian movement. So I guess these are some stories that you could expect from my side. And last but not least, we recently had a huge Metoo scandal or affair in German mainstream media. So I guess I could also share a little bit about that.
Thank you, Natalija, for mentioning that, because I also wanted to pose you a question about Axel Springer, basically, and the whole scandal that escalated in Germany, which was basically the #1 topic in country. And it has like literally the whole story of how you basically discover a sexual predator, basically in some of the very important media houses and companies worldwide, not just in Germany, since Axel Springer functions also in other states. But now I will give the floor to Jelena. Jelena, you can tell us something more about yourself, and also a note for the panelists, you can also speak in your language because we have the interpreters.
Sjajno, dobro jutro svima. Ja sam Jelena Jovanović, novinarka Vijesti, radim u Podgorici, živim u Podgorici, u Crnoj Gori. Pratim primarno teme crne hronike i istražujem sve što ima veze sa kriminalom i korupcijom. Također bavim se ljudskim pravima i građanski sam i ekološki aktivista. Drago mi je što sam danas tu s svima vama. Čini mi se da su većina žene ili sve divnim ženama, sjajnim i hrabrim, i raduje me što ćemo podijeliti naše iskustvo.
Thank you, Jelena. Okay, since you know basically who we are, I will just share the thing that I forgot to share in the beginning of my name, Sofia Todorovic. I work for BIRN, for Balkan Investigative Regional Reporting Network, as a program basically manager of the digital rights program that is mainly focused on basically expanding the skills of journalists in reporting on digital rights violations. And it is particularly focused on the gender component of all digital rights, let's say abuses or insults or violations that women basically face in the digital environment. So I would stop here. I think that maybe for the beginning, it would be very nice to talk a little bit about the context and about the background, because usually when we speak about why women don't speak up in general, it's very important to take into consideration basically the society where women has to live after she speaks up. What is the environment around her? And I think that Natalija also touched that part when she said that she wants to share something about the Metoo movement in a way in Serbia. So I don't know, I think that we can maybe start with Dafina this time. So Dafina, can you please give us a background or a context of Kosovo in which we are trying to emphasize women to speak up? So what's the context?
The context. Probably very similar to every country in the region, but maybe what kind of like makes Kosovo a bit more specific, because it's like also a smaller in number of population and also as a country. And what it makes is specific, particularly when it comes to the Me Too movement and to women speaking up publicly, naming the perpetrators, is that Kosovo still didn't undergo actually we still didn't witness the Me Too movement in the country. And similarly, how it was, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Montenegro, and also in Serbia in the beginning of the year, if I'm not wrong with the dates, after the actress publicly denounced her professor as a rapist. So we have until now only kind of like anecdotes. We have public secrets of people, of professors, of people on television, kind of like everybody knows who is the perpetrator, but still we don't have like public evidences, public naming. And maybe one thing that is quite specific is that the fear of to be stigmatized and the fear to be prejudiced is very high for women here. And we are like every day, only in the last year, and we had so many great violations of women's rights abuses that I don't know even where to start. I just like this morning, for example, I was kind of like hearing the news about this young girl in elementary school that was sexually harassed by her teacher. Only 2-3 days ago, we had the case when the evidence in the media came up that a man who raped a 15-year-old girl in 2011 or 12 got only an 8-month sentence, which is completely against even the law in Kosovo, because the criminal code foresees the sentence of minimum 5 years to 20 years. If I go only 2 months back, like in July or in August, we have the case when a dead body of a young girl was brought to the emergency hospital and after suffering 2 days of abuse and neglect by her partner who then killed her. If we go back 5-6 months ago, we have the case of another woman killed by her former husband, because the police and prosecution kind of like failed to protect her life, because they remove the protection order, the police didn't follow kind of institutional. Okay.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Do you hear me?
Now, yes.
And every case that I kind of like mentioned happened only in the last year. So just kind of like imagine the climate, the environment for women rights in Kosovo. And it kind of like also tells you not just like about sexism and misogyny within the private sphere, but also in public sphere. So we talk about like very high level of institutionalized sexism, where kind of like women are like being discriminated and harassed and abused in every sector of life, from work to when they go to ask protection to the police. And then it's completely different story how they are also again treated with sexism within the judiciary, within the justice system. So all these are kind of like factors that built up an environment of high discrimination that that makes a very good climate for stigmatization, that make women a bit to feel fearful to speak up, and also combined with the cultural elements of patriarchy, it makes it even more difficult for, let's say, for Me Too movement kind of like, to get underway. But the good signs are, as we witnessed this summer, it is that we had, like, for example, youngsters themselves organizing the protest after an incident happened in the school of a very small girl being harassed by older boys, and high school students, they took the streets, and they were like something that we were like waiting for 2-3 years from actresses and from activists, maybe kind of like to speak up publicly about the experiences. We witnessed actually from younger generation.
Yeah, but please hold the thought because we will talk. Hold the thought, because I would like that we all speak about the positive actions on what we can do as a society. Do we have any kind of, let's say, positive examples, however small they are within our societies? But we will talk about that later. And now I will give the floor maybe to Jelena, because Dafina mentioned one very important thing that makes the difference between Kosovo and other countries. That is when you have a small country with a small number of people, where basically everyone know each other. So it doesn't go just for a city, like we live in the same city, we know each other. It goes like for a country. So maybe Montenegro can relate with this.
Možda i gore. Kod nas i dalje pokušavaju da prikriju sva zlostavljanja, naročito ona koja dolaze u porodici. Crna Gora je u poslednjih 20 dana imala 2 femicida. Jedna mlada djevojka je ubijena zato što nije htjela da se uda za svog vjerenika, a u drugom slučaju, iako su se odmah organizovali protesti i pobjegao je njen vjerenik bivši koji je i ubica, uhapšen je posle par dana skrivanja. Građani su reagovali prilično burno i sa ovih visokih državnih adresa su došle osude toga, ali to je uglavnom ono što oni urade samo tad kad se desi, znači post festum, a ne da preduprijede takav vid ponašanja i takve zločine. I nakon možda 10-ak dana u Petnici je otac 7 djece ubio svoju suprugu i ranio kćerku. I nakon toga se ubio on. Kod nas su kazne izuzetno male. Negdje početkom godine smo imali statistiku da je u poslednjih, čini mi se, 10 godina bilo 50 presuda za silovanje i da je prosječna kazna 3 godine, iako je maksimalna 15 godina. Ono što je žalosno je da su bili slučajevi pravosudno okončani gdje su nastavnici u školi seksualno zlostavljali djecu. Bio je primjer u Baru, bio je primjer komunalnog policajca u Podgorici kom se sudi zbog seksualnog zlostavljanja djevojčice od svega 5-6 godina. I to je ono što nas zabrinjava. Država baš nema nikakav odgovor na to i najveći problem je u ruralnim krajevima gdje se prikriva bilo kakav vid nasilja u porodici, jer su i dalje, naravno tome doprinosi i patrijarhalno vaspitanje, ali i ono naše čuveno, bolje da niko ne čuje. Tako da Crna Gora zaista ima nezavidan skor po pitanju svih tih užasnih zločina.
Thank you, Jelena, for giving us the basically background for Montenegro. And I just wanted to ask one question because I think that the answer is yes. Just please let us know, did those women that at the end got killed, did they report the violence to the police?
Ova mlađa djevojka koja je ubijena u Podgorici, 18-godišnjakinja, je prijavila svog vjerenika, mislim da je bilo mjesec i nešto prije nego što je on ubio, i on čak nije ni prekršajno kažnjen. Uhapsili su ga, došao je kod tužilac, se izjasnio da nema elemenata krivičnog djela, iako je, sad ću parafrazirati, mada mislim da mogu čak i citirati prijetnju koju ona prijavila. On je njoj već tad najavio da ili će biti njegova ili neće biti živa. Tužilac je ocijenio da to nema elemenata krivičnog djela i ona je posle nepunih 2 mjeseca ubijena, i u istom u tom napadu teško je ranjen njen otac. Znači on nije pucao samo u nju, nego pucao je u njenog oca, jer je smatrao da porodica utiče na to da se oni ne mogu vjenčati, jer je ona muslimanka, a on katolik, što nije bilo tačno, već je ona pobjegla od njega zbog nasilja. A ova druga žena nije prijavljivala, oni su živjeli u Petnici, nije, makar da ja znam, nismo došli do tih podataka, oni žive u Petnici. Petnica je od nedavno opština i nema ni par hiljada stanovnika, tako da tamo će se teško što prijaviti od toga.
Thanks, Jelena. And when you mentioned Petnica, I think that maybe we can start now with Natalija Miletic, but Natalija will probably go a couple of
years earlier.
A few years basically backwards from Petnica, but we will come to that case as well. So
thank you. I just have to correct my colleague Dafina, because she mentioned that the Metoo movement in Serbia started with the actresses coming out against their acting teacher. And it actually started a few years earlier. And I think the biggest name in the Serbian Metoo movement is Marija Lukic. She's a woman from a very small city in Serbia named Brus, who took on her former employee. A very important thing in this story was that her employee was the mayor of this city and a very prominent politician of the ruling party, which maybe it's not so important because he kind of was in every party that was in government for the last decade or so. However, she decided that it was enough and that she would sue him for sexual harassment. He, was sending her, I think, over 15,000 of unsolicited text messages, giving her inappropriate offers and so on. So she sued him, and at the end, she actually won the case, and this politician, he was convicted and spent 3 months, sorry, wishful thinking, 3 months in prison. So that's how the Serbian Metoo movement gained momentum. And I think it's also at this point very important to mention the very brave journalist, our colleague Ivana Mastilović-Jasnić, who ever since was reporting and breaking the biggest Me Too stories that hit Serbia. Because as we are talking now about, being part of the Me Too movement or being involved with it from the journalist perspective, like when I was preparing for this panel, I talked to Ivana, and I was absolutely shocked when she told me that she was basically sued by this sexual perpetrator 38 times. So there's 38 different occasions when he sued her as a journalist who was just covering the story of, the things that he did, the sexual harassment or the crimes that he committed when it comes to Maria Lokic. So basically, this journalist, our colleague, will spend more time in court than he did for the sexual harassment charge, the things that he was charged of. So yeah, I think that's a very worrying trend. Also, when you decide to kind of put these stories in public, yeah, this is what you get in return. And not only that, this same journalist was the one who broke the stories about the very brave actresses that came out against their former acting teacher, who also was molesting some of them, if I understood correctly, as they were also underage and so on. So this is an ongoing court case, but the journalist was again sued by him. There's I think he sued her 3 times until now. So yeah, not only does she have to, do all the work and inform the public about these horrific stories, but she has to deal with the perpetrators in court, which is really, I mean, I can only say that it's really, I actually have no words for that. So yes, when it comes to Serbia, I think Serbia has absolutely the same problem as all the countries in the region. We have a huge, very high numbers of the domestic violence that goes underreported, or that is reported without having, appropriate actions from the police or from the social institutions that should be there to protect the women as well as the children and families. And yeah.
Thank you, Natalia. Yeah. I would maybe just add one more thing regarding the Petnica case. Basically, the last case that we faced in Serbia, I say we because I'm also Belgrade based, I'm from Serbia, was the case with the basically science center for youth, which is called Petnica, where we basically had a case of a professor who was basically taking pictures of young women who were basically spending their summers in that science center with the authorization of their parents. They're all underage. So basically that's something, and that was discovered that has been happening for years. And basically it caused a huge debate among the society. Is this an attack on science? How is it possible that now there is so much women that are speaking out about basically all these abuses that they face and these assaults basically committed against them, but that's also something that is maybe worth of mentioning. And this
yes, absolutely. And I think also the problem is that when these stories, when they're published, they there's of course a huge reaction by media, by activists, by different players, but then they somehow go under and everybody forgets them. I mean, especially you just mentioned Petnica. The problem was that most of these kids were underage, and we kind of forgot that story already, because as soon as it's not in the media, it kind of just falls under the radar. And yeah, I think it's very dangerous that stories of such abuse of power and sexual misconduct, not only towards children, but of course towards women that we know of, or they just, they're just like news for a couple of days. And I think it's very important that these stories are kept alive, like even while if the perpetrators are on trial, and it's important from our side as media workers or as activists and women in media, to try to keep them alive and to try to keep the public pressure high, because we saw in many cases, as in the case of Marija Lukic, or in also many international big profile Me Too cases, that, you know, keeping the public pressure is very important to, and it ultimately can lead to the, you know, bringing justice to the victims and, of course, incarcerating the perpetrators.
Thank you, Natalia. And now I will leave the floor to Zhaklin to tell us basically the background and the content, basically to
in Albania.
In Albania, yes, and then we can start discussing what all this has to do with the basically sexual assaults that female journalists suffer, or they're basically exposed to this type of sexual violence in their working environment.
I would like also to say something about the Me Too movement in Albania. Yeah, I agree with the colleagues from Serbia and from Kosovo. Also, Albania is very similar, because in the Balkan area we are different, but we are so similar. We didn't have Me Too movement here in Albania, and we don't have even one case of Me Too movement of a well-known or VIP person telling or to everybody, to the public, the story. And I think the reason why women are so afraid, because when I talk with my followers, or when they write to me asking for a favor or asking for help or something, the first thing that they have in common, it's like they're scared, they're afraid. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that I can be pregnant. I'm afraid to talk with my partner. I'm afraid to talk with my parents. I'm afraid to go to the doctor. I'm afraid that I'm not menstruating. I'm afraid that I'm menstruating too much. They are all scared about something. And we should see the political history and the cultural processes of Albania. They are very important, and they shape reality. They shape the way you act in society, and they shape the way you build relationship with other people. So during communism, Albanian society was like all the same, all agree, and the state was trying to kill all the time diversity. So we have all these people who are homogenic, and they try for every action they have, they need the approve of the other people. So also the place is very patriarchal, it's very misogynistic. So women, girls are really, really scared also to tell the truth about bullshit, not just about violence, harassment, homicide, and hate speech, cyberbullying, bullying. So also in young girls, in younger generation, like it's 5 years that I'm organizing the protest. Also, the last one was about Sabrina. She was killed by her husband in her parents' house. She was eating her dinner. So she asked to him to go outside and to talk about it, not talk in front of her parents, and he killed her. She was going down the stairs and he killed her. So we have almost 20 women killed, like, every year in Albania. Pedophilia is like flowering everywhere. And we have problems with institution, with police, prosecutor, judges, with the states. Nobody, they really do not care. We have amazing laws, but we are not, how do you say in English? We are not going through the law. Also, we are not respecting it, and we really don't care, because the corruption level is very high. So if you have money, you can pay everywhere. Also in rural areas, it's very hard and difficult. There's a lot of stereotypes. Also, like virginity in Albania is still a thing. It's still very important. So with this, you can imagine how all the society is still organized. Every summer we have the operations of giving your virginity back. So it's still a trend here in Albania, because Albanian guys who live abroad, they are coming back in the summer. They are searching for virgin Albanian women so they can take with them back to the states in Europe where they live. So they will have the waitress in the house, but the virgin waitress. But the things that makes me mad, really mad, is like, of course, women are not coordinated with them, but there's no a bit of life and a bit of
in Albania.
no, there's revolt. Okay.
Revolt,
Yeah. You know, just even when they are very young, you know, just a bit of it, just go out from your comfort zone, just try it, you know, also with your friends. What also I've seen is like young girls, like teen girls, also young girls, 20 years old girls or 30 years old girls. They have their friends, but it's not like a real sincere friendship, like supporting each other and being there for each other and saying the truth to each other. Like girl, they have if they are two best friends, one of them is not virgin, she will not tell the truth about her virginity to the other girl. So it's like big lie, big hypocrisy in the family and also in the society. So this is the how Albanian society is right now. I call it big hypocrisy, and also I call Albanian women hypocrite, because they don't do nothing to change a bit the society, but they complain about the society. So if you are acting with in hypocrite in two double ways, you are just doing nothing for the stereotypes you hate, but you are working to make these stereotypes even bigger, if you can understand what I'm saying. So the things that I talk about sexuality, it makes me understand how bad the situation is and how it's very important all together, men and women, to work and to be coordinated and to help each other and to support each other, also with other states in the Balkan area. But here we like all hate each other, and but since we are coming from communism and we don't really believe in the state, we believe in the community. So at the end of the day, we hate the community, but we are going, when we need help, we are going to the community. So we accept the community for what it is, and we take from the community what we need, doing nothing to make the community better, you know? It's just using them. It's not making plans for a long time, plans for this society. And also here in Albania, we don't have data for nothing. Like we don't have data, so we can read the data and actually do strategies about changing and doing something better for the society. Also, if we do good laws or new laws, we don't have budget for these laws. So why we need good laws or other laws when we don't have budget for these laws? So, this is the situation here. What makes me a bit happy, it's at least in the last year, we have some female movements or some feminist movements. Usually they are operating online on social media, but that's good because we are used social media for public pressure and also for example, for TV show when they act in a misogynistic way, also for public person who act on television or who do declarations who are very misogynistic, or for businesses who do commercials that are really misogynistic. Like the last one was ask to your partner to pay you the lips so he will enjoy more your lips when he will kiss you. So yeah, I know. I know.
My
I know.
God.
Yeah, I know. So it's like Me Too movement. We are very far away from the Me Too movement. If you go in the media and you talk about your story and you use your story like a storytelling to make people understand and to make people to be to see as a new model in you, you are stereotype and you have a lot of hate speech online. So it's pretty hard, but it's very exciting too.
Thank you, Zhaklin. Okay, I think that now since I think that we covered many of the aspects basically of all our societies that are basically preventing all women to speak up, that are leaving them basically alone in the situation when they face violence without any kind of support, and with the, let's say, possibility that even if they speak out, they will be subjected to many other like very bad things. But now, since we covered,
I think also that misogynistic people, at least here in Albania, like they don't have the women who are in the model they love or they have constructed. They have the women who go outside of this model. So if you go out of the line, you will feel and you will face the hate. If you are behaving like a feminine model, like they accept and they like, it's okay. You will not have so much hate. If you speak up, they will.
Yeah, but basically I think that also in other stories from other countries, this patriarchal criteria for what is like a good woman, whatever, and how we should value women is something that is also
I think it's very important to talk also about
that
this.
We have in common. But now we will switch to journalism, and now I would like you to basically present us with what is happening in the newsrooms in the Balkans. Basically, that is something that we still don't have an insight of, because all these examples that you shared are linked with, film industry, ordinary women, public servants, and other. But what we are actually trying also to emphasize also other, let's say, professions, because we here stand up as media, to basically start this type of debates with their professions, because there is no profession that is like immune to these kind of challenges, and each woman in any environment can be subjected to different types of violence. Since I think that we all agree that there are so many problems that are deeply rooted in our societies, and we don't have institutional system that is dealing with these problems. So that at the end of the day takes us to a really bad conclusion that most likely journalism is not, let's say, a safe haven for women. So from your experience as journalist, I would like to hear and to maybe start talking about what do you see as the biggest challenges a female journalist faced in their newsrooms, and what prejudice and stereotypes are most common for female journalists that can basically, at the end of the day, contribute to the atmosphere where they can be subjected to any type of violence or basically that is based on their gender. I will start with Natalija, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I was thinking before this panel again about, and I couldn't remember not only one, maybe you can correct me, maybe I'm wrong. Is there in any Serbian mainstream media a woman that is like the chief editor-in-chief? Do you know any? Yeah.
At this point, no. Maybe only in Christianic, but that's not the mainstream media.
That's not mainstream media. There are some others. I think there's one in Sins, if I'm not Milica Tomic, if I'm not wrong. But like mainstream media, there's not one single woman that is editor-in-chief. So I guess I would definitely frame that as a very big problem, especially when we look at the fact that Serbia has amazing female journalists. Female journalists in Serbia are probably the bravest of them all, given the fact or taking into consideration under what kind of pressure and how dangerous it is to be a journalist in Serbia. So I'm pretty certain that Serbia doesn't lack knowledgeable or brave or smart female journalists that could definitely, you know, be at the forefront of any media house. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So in this context, I'm sure that, like, since Serbian media is still kind of boys' clubs, I would frame that as the problem number one. I personally don't know of any Metoo case when it comes to journalists in Serbia, or neither did I personally have any experience of this sort. But having in mind everything that we talked about until now, you know, how women are treated, how people react to women who speak up, not only in Serbia, but in the whole region, it is very, very hard for me to imagine that there hasn't been any case of sexual harassment or misuse of power. That was, for instance, the case with the BIRN editor-in-chief. So it doesn't really need to be a case of direct sexual harassment or direct sexual, any type of violence, but it can just be the misuse of power, you know, you knowing that you are the boss and, you know, taking advantage of it when it comes to your female colleagues. So yeah, that's definitely problem number one. And yeah, I think I'm hoping that we will, I mean, I'm not so hopeful, but maybe one day the change will come.
I'm seeing also comments in the box, but I think that Natalija said she was speaking about mainstream media. Basically, as for the independent media and other media, Larissa shared the information that amongst 85 independent media in 6 countries that are covered by the project as well, editorial ratio is 45-55. So basically, I think that for independent media, I think that we all excluded them basically from this from this basically comment that in the mainstream media, like I don't know, RTS, maybe when I say media, I think both print and TV version, Politika, Blitz, and many other like the most followed media in Serbia with the biggest reach and influence of the audience on the editorial or managerial position. The number of women is not like something that they should be proud of. In contrary to BIRN, where basically 80% of the organization is female, basically completely. So our both regional director, managing editor, Balkan Insight, all program managers basically are women. So thank you, Natalija. And now
I think, sorry, I would like also to mention Krik. I think they're like 99% or something like that.
Yeah, I think that we have many positive examples.
Yeah,
this,
absolutely.
Like,
as you said, I was talking about mainstream media.
I would maybe now switch to Dafina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dafina, so basically the same questions. What do you see as the biggest challenges, and have you faced any prejudice or stereotypes about female journalists? Tell us something more about that. Basically, how women whose profession is journalism, what are the main prejudices and stereotypes within Kosovo, let's say public, but both in the newsrooms where they are working, since probably if you didn't experience it, you probably know someone, because we all know someone.
I'll start. No, actually, these questions are kind of like really, really important. And I thought about this yesterday, and I just wanted to confirm a bias that I had. Is there any report also from Association of Journalists and from different associations in group? Is there any data and good report that talks about different challenges of female journalists over the years, and there is none. And that is like the first challenge of all, because, for example, my experience, not every experience is similar and same. I've worked, for example, in a very alternative media with the feminist editor-in-chief, where human rights are very important, but and which makes me kind of, you know, very lucky to work in this environment. But then you have like working for a TV, working for radio, working for a newspaper. It kind of like depends who is editor-in-chief, how feminist they are. So there are like a lot of factors that kind of tackle in the end, or like influence also the challenges of women journalists in general. For example, by coincidence, yesterday, I was like having a coffee with two other journalists, and we're like talking about harassment that happens in front of people, journalists that are in newsroom, that can be also like very famous, prominent faces of Kosovo, in front of the eyes of journalists that sometimes even go in the media and talk about sexual harassment, but that happened inside of the newsrooms, and how much normalized and prevalent it is. And it's completely rooted into power relations thing, particularly in power imbalanced relations, and it particularly happens to very young journalists that start doing the job for the first time, and are harassed by their male colleagues, particularly by being involuntarily and unwantingly touched. And there are like times when they go and address their complaints to HR and or to the editors, and they are like shut down by saying, well, you know, kind of like, you know, those boys are like that. They want just like, you know, to joke around. And so like harassment is not, it's maybe it's very rarely talked as a topic between media discussion in Kosovo. It still didn't take the attention that it needs to have, the important attention. Though it happens every day. Everybody, if doesn't have their own experience, know at least 5-6 other women that suffered harassment in the newsroom in Kosovo. And I think you wanted to ask me.
Maybe more direct question. Have you ever faced any sort of editorial interference in your work that you felt that it was based on your gender?
Me not. And maybe one reason is for that, because I built up as a journalist at Kosovo 2.0.
Yeah.
I think that is, as I kind of like, you know, I think I am one of this, I'm very lucky that actually it happened for me to grow up as a journalist and to build my profile as a journalist at Kosovo 2.0, where, yeah, when we kind of like, it's this kind of topics that editor-in-chiefs and other editors all the time supported us and other journalists kind of like to push for. But my experience is not a general experience. It's not an experience that actually it's a minority experience, because most of other journalists, women and men, but particularly also women, have a lot of interferences. And when it comes to women, many times also, you know, because of the gender. So yeah, I think it was mentioned in Natalija in Serbia about like how a lot of majority of actual editor-in-chiefs are men, and I agree that gender is very, very important, and Kosovo 2.0 is an example of that. And there are also other media outlets. Actually, we have a lot of positive steps in Kosovo. A lot of editors and editors of chief are women, and that is also translated and manifested also in the work and editorial policies, because it directly influences also the editorial content. What are you going to produce to put like women rights more into the agenda, and also to promote women in higher position, but not necessarily. But I also have to say, not necessarily being a woman in top position means it will translate into having a feminist approach. I think it needs to be a feminist woman. That kind of like makes a lot of difference. About stereotypes, what thing that
that's Albanian situation. Sorry, Dafina, to tell you, but that's Albanian situation. We don't have the gender gap in representation, but it doesn't mean that the policy is feminist, since they are women and they have a vagina.
I wanted to add something about stereotypes.
Yes, about stereotypes. Maybe besides the regular ones, how women journalists are all the time kind of like objectified and not like, you know, and they are usually kind of like put into how to say, traditional established categories and experts, which is when we see every night in TV discussion, and when we do stories based on who is the source, and usually you have, for example, things that it comes down to culture and sociology and social things, only women to talk about it, or arts and culture, and then you have like politics, daily affairs and economy. You have also sources being men, but also them being called as an expert or being interviewed as an expert. But besides, because I think these are like the standard stereotypes that happen in almost every newsroom. But what is quite interesting for me is also the respect, how much women needs to work more than their male colleagues in order to kind of like, you know, to gain respect for the work. Though what we have seen until now, we've seen that a majority of best produced pieces all the time, most of the time in the 5-6 years, are produced by women in Kosovo. They write about social justice, they write about different violations, abuses, they write about different violations that are conducted by the state at different state institutions. They write about environment, they write about children, they write about old people, about ageism, and you have all this diverse range of topics that are usually initiated and written by men. And they write also about something that always was seen as a male topic, corruption and also organized crime. And on the other hand, you have male journalists that still see investigation only as a corruption thing, as a corruption topic, or as a leak that they gain by their male politician friends. So that is, so you have all this diversity of topics that women do, and still in the end of the day, they are like kind of like less respected and within the newsroom, and their work is completely less respected, because there's also this bias that a lot of stories that they cover are not political, that social issues are not political, that human rights are not political, or women's rights are not political.
Thank you, Dafina. I think that now Zhaklin can follow up and maybe try to give us the answer. Does like the prejudice and the stereotypes and basically the way female journalists are treated in Albania affect this climate where journalists do not speak up if they are faced with violence in their newsrooms?
I think that in Albania, yeah, it's the same, but it's also different because in Albania we have a big crisis in the media sector, like big. We talk very much about social issues, but just for clickbaits and just for, you know, to have the public attention for 2 or 3 days. But we don't really care at the end of the day what's happening and what was the issues. And also we don't have the gap of representation of editor-in-chief, but their policy, it's not like a feminist policy, you know, their work. So I think like Dafina, they should be feminist, or they should be into gender equality in order to work into this topic. I think the youngest journalists, they face these problems. Like in the media where I work, the editor-in-chief, they are all women. Most of the staff here is women. Also in the past works where I have been, most of them were women. And also we have a lot of top leaders, women, like very important person in Albania, but they don't speak up, not because they are afraid of it, because they don't have interest to do it. They are very, you know, close up to politicians, to political parties, and there's no need to talk about society, because their life, it's pretty good. It's very good. So this is the situation in Albania. But I think the biggest issue women are facing in here, it's trust about their work, trust about their words, trust about the media they are working through, trust about the other media and the work you are doing. Like the fact that you are a woman and the fact that you are doing something and you are a woman, it makes you be more criticized and be on the loop of everybody to talk about it. If you are saying the same thing and you are a man, the people will trust it more, will agree with you more, and will support you more. This is the situation in Albania. In media, we are in a big crisis, like political media, read media, social media. I've never seen Albania like this, and there's no ethic at all in writing, in doing titles, in posting pictures, in posting stories about younger generations, about women. It's crazy what's happening now in Albanian media. And here, the pop culture, it's so inside also the media that now everything it's about showing and trying to have followers and trying to work through social media, not giving a real message, not caring about the message, not caring about what will happen with the society after you gave this particular message. It's just about showing, having followers, and showing to other people. And also big media are not really interested in giving information. It's all about disinformation. So now also, beside trust, the big challenge we have as a journalist, but also as a public, is to understand what's the real news and what's not the real news. Young girls who are new journalists, usually they do lifestyle journalism, so they don't work in politics, so they have a big support from other journalists. In politics, I think it's more difficult for a female journalist. We have just a bunch of them. They talk a lot. They are very famous here in Albania. They are part of the most political famous show in Albania, like 2 or 3 times a week. But still, their number is very small in confront of men. In the political, just in the for the political
Albania,
topics.
we are also
in other topics, no. In other topics, no. We have a lot of females. In politics and corruption, we have most men.
Okay, but basically in Albania, we don't have any example of journalists who ever spoke about any kind of sexual violence and misogyny that she was faced to. Basically.
No.
Not in Albania, not in Kosovo, not in Serbia at the end of the day. As I can see. So I would maybe now like to go a little bit deeper. Why is that? Because we explained the background, we explained the context, we explained the the basically number of women. We explained the challenges that they're faced, that they have to work more to be respected in the same way, and then we basically still do not have any of them speaking
I think
about
it comes from within you. It's very important, your personal background, your family background, the messages they give it to you when you were a child, because you are going to be what you have seen in your family. And if your family, since you were a child, they give you the message to stand up for yourself and to speak up for yourself and to become the person you want to become, not the person the society wants you to become, then you can't do otherwise. I think that's very important, like family message, though your personal background as a journalist. Of course, I'm scared. I go on the police like 4 or 5 times a year. Of course, people are going like cyberbullying me, threatening me every day. Sometimes, of course, I'm scared for my physique, you know, in Kolumiti. But I have one life, and I have nothing to lose, you know. And I prefer to die trying than die without trying it. And it's not living for me. Like for me, my personal experience, I could not live otherwise, you know. I can't shut up. I just can't shut up. It makes me crazy.
You shouldn't, Zhaklin. I think that now we should leave the floor to Jelena.
Yeah, sorry.
Why journalists in Montenegro don't speak up? And based on everything that we said, it's very hard for us to think that basically there is that none of the female journalists that basically was involved in journalism has ever experienced harassment or misogyny in her working environment, or any kind of sexual assault, or maybe that never happened. That's also an option. I would be extremely happy if this never actually happened in any of our countries, but it's very hard for me to believe that.
Hajde da vjerujemo da se nije desilo. Nije samo to problem o kom novinarke ćute. Novinari ćute i o svim problemima koji se njima dešavaju. Nebitno da li su to male plate, da li su to prijetnje, uznemiravanja, ucjene, a svjedoci smo da se to svakodnevno dešava. Mislim, dešava se svuda, naročito kod nas u proteklih godinu učestali napadi na novinare, ne seksualni, nego ovi i fizički i bilo koji vid prijetnje. Ali vrlo mali broj ljudi odlučuje da istjera sve to do kraja. Mislim da je ista ta stvar i sa svim ovim drugim vrstama napada i mizoginije. Nadam se da je koleginica piše, vjerujem da se sjećaš radnica, voditeljki Atlas televizije i njihovog slučaja, one su prijavile njih 3 da su po tom osnovu baš proganjane u Atlas televiziji, i to je jedini slučaj o kom se pričalo u Crnoj Gori. Oni su na sudu bili, mislim, ako se dobro sjećam, da je sa Duškom Kneževićem, vlasnikom Atlas televizije, i ne znam što se desilo sa tim postupkom do kraja. Sve ostalo u Crnoj Gori se ćuti. Mislim da je ovdje generalno problem što su mediji polarizovani i što apsolutno nema solidarnosti međuredakcijske, iako novinari pokušavaju to da isprave. Mi se na terenu savršeno slažemo, ali isto tako savršeno jedni drugima kopamo jamu na svakom polju. To su već i pokušaj ucjena sagovornika da ako da recimo meni informaciju, neće nikada moći da bude objavljeno u nekom drugom mediju ili obratno. To je ono čega se ja ježim i o čemu mi ne pričamo javno. Ali ja nisam svjedočila apsolutno nijednoj vrsti zlostavljanja u našoj redakciji. Da jesam, svi biste bili obaviješteni, jer bih fizički odbranila koleginicu, makar toliko imam snage. Niti mi se bilo koja koleginica požalila na nešto slično, niti sam ja doživjela bilo što slično. U vijestima je veći broj žena na svim pozicijama nego muškaraca. Nije glavna urednica u štampanom izdanju žena, ali jeste izvršna urednica. direktorica nam je žena, glavna urednica je u televiziji, na portalu ima, čini mi se, više žena nego muških kolega. U Crnoj hronici imamo samo jednog kolegu i urednika, urednike Crne hronike. Na uredničkim pozicijama je više žena i mislim da to zaista doprinosi tom takvom odnosu u vijestima gdje apsolutno nijedna žena nije doživjela problem zato što je žena. Nijedna novinarka može da doživi problem ako ima netačnu informaciju, problem u smislu da mora objasniti pozadinu toga, ali da nema problem samo da se njen rad manje vrednuje jer je žena. Naprotiv, nama su udarne vijesti u svim rubrikama, autori su žene. Ono što je problem u Crnoj Gori jeste problem kako nas doživljavaju ljudi sa druge strane. Jedno vrijeme su bili užasni komentari na društvenim mrežama, komentari na portalima, da novinarke dobijaju informaciju tako što će seksualno opslužiti nekoga ko im daje informaciju. I to je ono sa čim se mi nosimo. Ja sam više puta rekla, jer sam čak i čitala poruke, i to, vjerovali ili ne, od kolege, ne iz moje redakcije, ali kolega koji radi u Crnoj hronici, dok sjedim sa sagovornikom i snimam izjavu, on je dobio poruku od novinara druge redakcije, morat ću sad da budem prosta, ali ću je citirati, zašto joj daješ informaciju ako je neće završiti. Ja sam tad odlučila da o tome, ja mnogo bukvalno lajem na Facebooku i mnogo pišem o tome kako ljudi doživljavaju sve nas i doživljavaju generalno žene. Ovdje je i dalje uvreženo mišljenje da ti, ako si žena, možeš postići uspjeh samo ako si seksualno podobna i podatna. Ne tako što ćeš ti raditi vrijedno, biti pametna, truditi se, nego tako što ćeš ti vjerovatno se povlačiti od jednog do drugog muškarca, što je apsolutna laž. I onda sam ja znala da napišem status, jer naravno ne mogu u tekstu staviti na kraju teksta jer se bavim veoma osjetljivim temama, da ne daj Bože da malo bolje izgledam. Tek tad bi vjerojatno bila neka priča, jer ja se zapitam, ok, zašto sad, čemu to? Mislim da sam za života, i to je pretežno išlo od kolega iz drugih redakcija, za života čula za nekih jedno 30-ak svojih ljubavnika, od kojih možda nekih nisam čak nikad ni izjavu uzela, da ne pričamo o tome da nismo imali kontakt fizički uživo, jesam možda zvala nekog za izjavu i već prvih mjeseci u novinarstvu sam odlučila da na to stavim tačku i da čak ako je ljudima lakše da pričaju, kažem jeste i bilo mi je super. Mislim da su nakon mog takvog odnosa prema tome odustali, nakon toga su, kao i za sve ostale koleginice koje se bave, kreću druge priče. Radi za nekoga, uzima pare i naravno to se vrlo malo dešava kad pišu kolege. Taj dio se dešava malo kad pišu kolege, ali kad pišu koleginice onda idu sve moguće etikete koje se lijepe na sve nas, iako iza toga apsolutno ništa ne stoji, stoji samo naša želja da tragamo za istinom i moj problem ili vrlina, kako god ga ko gledao, ja volim da se takmičim i ja volim da istjeram nešto do kraja. Ja volim da se takmičim i sama sa sobom, a ne sa drugima. Volim da imam ekskluzivu, volim da imam dobro istraživanje, volim da se bavim temama kojima kasnije krenu da se bave i ostali. Volim da se bavim onim što možda u tom trenutku ne vide drugi i možda sam zbog toga i bila više na meti napada. Ja sam i sada sa 24-časovnim obezbeđenjem i nije lako, ali ne odustajem.
Thank you, Jelena, very much. I think you got straight to the point, literally, and I think that you covered one very important part since in the beginning of this round of questions. We were focused on what challenges female journalists face within their newsrooms, and now you reflected on, let's say, I think the field where female journalists are exposed to, let's say, severe violation, and they're somehow asked to act very carefully when they're interviewing an important individual. I think that we had a case in Serbia that I would just like to mention when we had this scandal about the actor Branislav Lečić and Daniela Steinfeld, one journalist basically shared the messages that he sent her after she interviewed him, that he sent her on her private phone, which she used to contact him for an interview. And then he was basically sending her messages. Everything was about sexism when it comes to the content of those messages. He was trying to basically convince her to start seeing him, but at the end of the day, you as a journalist are faced that if you say no, or if you act, let's say, appropriately to situation like that, that means that maybe you will never be able to get an interview from that person. And that means that if your editor asks you to interview that important someone who basically sexually mistreated you, in the way it's not matter, and if you fail to do so, maybe you will get fired at the end of the day, and because you will not be able to deliver. And for you as a woman will be very hard to explain that, and especially in societies and in the atmosphere that we already described, that it's not your fault. It doesn't have anything to do with you, that someone decided to basically go one step over the line and to interfere in something that doesn't have anything with the reason why did you address him in the first place. So
yes, because here in Albania, the situation is quite differently, because here in the media, the woman is objectified all the time, but women, they are objectifying themselves by, they choose to be objectified because they know that being in a particular way and acting in a particular way, it will be more easy for you to have that interview, to go to at that important meeting, to have that important job, or your ways, you will have more opportunity. So they act like this because they know that their work will be more easy. They don't react, they don't protest over it. They know it is like this and they just act like this, like using it. I don't know if this okay when you know you have the power and you use the power, but still you are not giving a good example for other women in the society. So you choose to objectify yourself because you think men are stupid and you can use them with your body and the way you look, because it will be more simple for you, and you choose to be like that. You are not doing nothing for the other women in the society. So this is the situation in here. And when you ask one of them, why they are acting like that, or why they are not choosing to do something for the other women in the society. And for example, sometimes the answer was like, this is my life, I'm doing this for me, this is my choice, and this is what I think it's okay or good for me to do.
I would just, I want also now to give the floor to Natalija to share, especially the example that you mentioned in the beginning, but I would just like to answer you, Zhaklin, regarding the perspective that you just shared.
Yes.
I just think that women are learned, and these patterns of how they actually deserve attention, or how they are fighting for their success, it's something that is imposed by society. And because
yes.
of all these challenges that we were talking, I think that education of women as well is very important for the solidar feminist fight.
Critical thinking, because here in Albania, the system of education, it doesn't show you how to think, but just to execute.
But that's now a really big topic. I will not go into details into that, but feminism is something that we all lack, and this solidarity among women is something that we need to exercise more in the future, and to basically provide other women with resources and knowledge to somehow resist to these type of behaviors. That at the end of the day, it's not something that makes any person happy. Basically, it's just something that you learned how you should behave if you're a woman, and this has to do something with those patriarchal criteria and values that all women face. Natalija, maybe you can now tell us something more about that, and also reflect on everything that we said in the meantime?
Yeah, well, yes, this is a very good example because we really, now I'm talking about the BILD scandal that recently, or that is still shaking the German media world. Because I think it's a good example because we always kind of look up to Germany, I'm referring to all the Balkan countries as I don't know, a good example of how the system works, how media work, and so on. But sometimes it's really not such a good example, and BILD is kind of proves the point. What happened here is like their editor-in-chief, Reichelt, he was accused of sexual misconduct and misuse of power because he was basically having relationships with his younger colleagues and female colleagues, and sometimes that meant that they would kind of climb the hierarchy or get promoted after having some kind of relationship with him. And this was first discovered last year in February, and when the Axel Springer publisher did an internal investigation about what occurred in the BILD media. So what they did is like, it was clear that there was some kind of misconduct, but then I guess everybody, I'm not sure if everybody knows, so I'm just gonna emphasize that again, Axel Springer is one of the most powerful publishers, media publishers here in Germany, and BILD is one of the biggest tabloid newspapers in Germany and probably in the world, or at least in Europe. So we're talking about a really, really powerful guy that was facing some Metoo accusations, so to say. So what the publisher did, instead of, they acknowledged these accusations, and what they did is they didn't fire him or anything. They just gave him a co-worker or a co-editor, a female co-editor, who would be then responsible like for human resources within the BILD magazine. And only a year and a half later, the story again gained momentum because journalists were again working in the meantime, still researching what he was doing, whether there were new victims were coming up, and so on. So there was another mini scandal because it was German journalists who were researching this story, and they had it was agreed that it will be published by a publisher called Ibsen and their news outlets. Only when, like because it's a private owned publisher, when the private owner of this Ibsen publisher realized what story is going to be published, and that is basically against one of the most powerful media people in Germany, he decided to shut it off and said, they're not going to publish it. He used an example, as an excuse that they're competing media and so on, which was really absolutely it was really ridiculous to use such an excuse. So at the end, Spiegel published the story. No, excuse me, I made a mistake. At the end, the New York Times was the first one who published the story. So even here in Germany, there was basically a reluctance to publish a story about accusations from a very powerful media person to that extent that it had to be published by foreign media. And only then did the Axel Springer publisher react, and they sacked the editor-in-chief from BILD. Of course, the question is why. I personally, since they didn't fire him earlier in February when he was facing the same accusations, But they did it like at the later point when New York Times published these accusations. And not only I mean, now it's clear that it is because Axel Springer is in the middle of taking over Politico magazine, and the deal is not yet closed. So because of this international pressure, and to avoid spoiling their reputation in the US especially, they decided to fire this editor-in-chief.
And sorry, I would just add, for me, the most striking thing was that in February, where the first article was published, they said that they treated his behavior as like he committed a mistake. And in the text, all the time you can see like, because of the mistake, he made mistakes. So basically, literally, they just described his.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what's very telling, I think, it's the fact that I mean, especially when we were just recently talking about like, why don't journalists from the region come out, with their Me Too stories? I mean, I cannot. The journalist that came out or provided some evidence against the BILD editor, they're still all anonymous. And the fact that at the time when the investigative journalists doing the story were about to tell Axel Springer publisher, that they have new evidence, the victims asked to be outside of Berlin. So they were basically, in a way, in hiding, out of reach from this very powerful media moguls and a very powerful publishing house, in order to probably to feel safer, So I think if we try to understand this in the Serbian context, where you have a lot of media that are working closely with the government, editors-in-chief that are connected with prosecutors, police, and so on, I really cannot. I mean, it would really be very hard for the victims, like if they would want to come out against someone, to protect their anonymity, to be sure that they will be protected if they feel like they want to stay anonymous, for instance. While on the other hand, of course, when you're working as a journalist, and if you're working in the public sphere, of course you don't want your reputation. I'm not going to say damaged. I don't think that it's damaging your reputation that you're a victim, but to be, always
creates difficulties in your life.
Exactly.
Like
It won't make your
difficulty.
So it won't make your life easier. It won't make your work easier to be always seen as the woman who brought down this editor-in-chief or this colleague or this and that. So we know that also from the experiences of other victims, not necessarily journalists. And last but not least, when it comes to Serbia, and I guess the region as well, the reason is also, being afraid of your financial stability, or your finances being in danger, because especially in Serbia, there's not, too many options. So when you're a journalist, I mean, there are many media and so on, but if we are not talking about media from Belgrade, if you're a journalist coming from a smaller city where there is probably just one media outlet that you can work for, it is, I guess, a hard decision to make and to come up against your employer, or just to a colleague or whatever.
Thank you, Natalija, and especially thank you for emphasizing this difference between big cities and smaller areas, where we basically have one local media, and we all know that local media in the region are usually struggling with the fundings, which means that basically the salaries of the journalists are not that big, and for sure they are not enough if a journalist would like to start a legal procedure against someone who insulted her in any way. I think that will probably be one of the last things on her list. But and I would also like to read, I see that people are commenting in the chat and asking questions, which I'm like really glad. We also have one example of journalists from Kosovo, where the message says that the journalists in Kosovo, some of them do not wear dresses, for example, because if they have to work with, let's say, the police, they would be harassed, and if they speak up, they won't be able to collaborate with the institution. So that's also important when you collaborate, particularly with the public institutions. So not just powerful individuals, but the representatives of any state institution. Your life can become much harder, and you might be enabled to do your job if you confront and if you basically stand for yourself. And these are all the challenges that I think that we already covered them. But now in the next round, I would just ask you now for the next round to be like very maybe brief, like up to 3 minutes max per person. I would like to, and then we should leave the floor.
Sofija, mogu li samo, sjetila sam se nečega davno?
Yes.
Je li okej?
Yes, da.
Vezano za ovu temu. Mislim da je 2007. godina, ako ne i ranije, djevojka više odavno nije u medijima, prebačena je u Crnu Goru da radi iz Srbije i rekla mi je da je radila je na jednoj privatnoj televiziji, da je direktor televizije tražio od voditeljki, u stvari kad je napuštala, to je tek rekla, da je direktor televizije tražio od voditeljki da kada dolaze njegovi neki bitni gosti iz svijeta show biznisa i ostale VIP ličnosti, obavezno budu prisutne na tom druženju na jahti, kao dekor. Nijedna od njih nikada se nije javno pobunila protiv toga, naprotiv morale su tamo da se pojave. To je bilo u sklopu obaveze. Ja tad nisam radila u medijima, ali mi je bilo interesantno da to nigdje ne možeš pročitati. Stoga sam se sjetila, vezano je za Crnu Goru.
And from my experience and to what has brought to my knowledge in Serbia, this is not a rare situation that when women, and not just in journalism, in all other professions, that basically the company is showing off with the female bodies who are employed in their companies, which is like insane. And this is a trend that I think that for the Balkans is very common. Thank you, Jelena, for emphasizing this.
I want to say also something about Albania and about our Prime Minister. Can you hear me?
Yes.
About our Prime Minister, who is well known about his relationship with his partners. He was very violent with them, and usually he is still very violent with journalists from media who support the opposite party. Usually he make fun of them if they are very, particularly one of them from Suripik.net. She is very brave and she's constantly asking questions to him, like directly, and he is trying to not responding to her, but trying to make fun of her, trying to make fun of how she looks or how young she is, or trying to shut up her microphone, or even not letting her inside of the room, of the newsroom. So this is a very bad example for all the other political parties or political person, because if the Prime Minister is doing this, of course, the atmosphere will be very horrible. I would like to say it.
Thank you for raising that as well. So in the next 10 minutes, I will just ask you to be brief and to answer my questions, since I think that we tackled almost everything from various angles and perspectives. So I'm interested to hear, what do you think that what basically advice do you have for female journalists, especially young journalists, on how they could protect themselves in the working environments, and what we can do to put the pressure on the media houses to basically take into consideration the gender component of all possible abuses that can be committed against their employees in a way, and what do we all as a society can do. Also, you can feel free to share the positive examples from your environment. Well, I will start maybe with Novinarke protiv nasilja, which is an informal group that was based basically in Serbia. Many of the members are actually of the group are journalists, feminists, and other women who are basically trying to create the system of support both for journalists and other professionals who are like female and who face any kind of violence. So basically this is some sort of a support group that can, for me, the existence of the group itself is empowering. And I think that if a woman know that there is someone who can hear her story without judging her, I think that is already one very important step for a victim from any profession to speak up, to have like a person of trust to whom she can say something. So maybe Dafina can go first.
I'm kind of like linking it with Georgina Bomi's comment about how, you know, about with the journalists that need to be kind of like careful how they kind of like dress up when they go on the ground and they are interviewing the public institution. And these are actually, you know, these kind of issues that in the end kind of like become a bit of professional deformation in the sense you do all these things and you take them kind of like you take them for granted, all these actions without like really reflecting. And I think it's quite important not just for younger journalists but for every woman journalist kind of like to be more vocal within the newsroom about all these issues that kind of like they face weekly, monthly when they do their work, because also just the idea that you need kind of like to dress up less elegant or less sexy or less whatever when you go to interview, let's say, a politician or police or any interview on the ground, it is important thing to be kind of like discussed in the newsroom. And I don't think that is actually something that is being discussed. Also these like things that seem very kind of like irrelevant. And also what I find like really important is, because as I said also earlier, it's usually women that have in their hands more stories that are like in relation with trauma, like with sexual violence, with rapes, with survivors, victims of domestic violence, and so on. And when you are like all the time with these kind of categories, interviewing and trying kind of like to document this kind of stories, it is something that you like, and I link it also with, you know, when it is something that kind of like even like stops you kind of like to complain about any kind of harassment that you might experience while doing your work. And that is also quite linking, it's part of professional deformation for sure, because you do the documentation, you are there to do that kind of documentation, not to talk about yourself and your experiences, about others' experiences. But many times women cover very traumatic experiences. So there are like, you know, this kind of the relations and this kind of stories that and feelings and emotions that don't seem to be very important, but are like kind of crucial in how, you know, women do the job on the ground.
Thank you, Dafina. Maybe Jelena now. Jelena, what would your message be to other journalists? And I also wanted to say something, since we have like lots of attendees at this meeting during the whole meeting. So if anyone would like to contact us or to write something or to share her experience with us, because I see that we have lots of female journalists here today with us, please feel free to contact us or to ask any kind of, let's say, organization writing in order to, I don't know, that can help you basically to share your experience. We organize this panel if for all of you here, and if someone heard something that she needed to hear basically for a long time, feel free to contact us. It will be completely anonymous. So that's it. Jelena, can you share with us basically what are the examples of resistance in Montenegro to everything that we just said, and if you have any advice message for female journalists and young professionals who are entering this profession, it would be good to hear something.
Imam. Juče sam razgovarala sa koleginicama budućim koje su na fakultetu. Ja volim da pričam sa mladim budućim kolegama, jer mislim da dugogodišnje iskustvo može da koristi svima koji žele da slušaju. Ne samo u našoj profesiji, nego bilo gdje da se to dešava. Žena ne smije ćutati ni o čemu, ne smije ćutati ni onome što se dešava u kući, a ne pogotovo ne onome što ne mora da živi. Nijedno od nas ne mora da živi ovo i nije niko uperio pušku u nas da nas natjera da se bavimo ovim. Ovo je izbor svih nas i svaka od nas bira na koji način će se boriti i za informacije i za dobre teme i birati teme, i nijedna ne bi smjela da ćuti i ako ima bilo kakvu vrstu prinude, makar to bile i one suptilne poruke koje stižu nakon odrađenog intervjua, i treba jasno staviti već među prvim koracima jasno staviti do znanja da to nije ono zbog čega su one ušle u svijet novinarstva, iako ne sumnjam da mlade djevojke i atraktivne na bilo kom polju da mogu imati takve ponude. Moraju se oduprijeti tome i moraju znati same da glasno pričaju o tome, jer ukoliko znamo da štitimo tuđa prava, a ne štitimo svoja, onda uopšte nismo iskreni u tome što radimo. Da nije koleginica koja je sa nama podsjetila na koleginice iz Atlas TV-a, i ja sam ih zaboravila, eto koliko je u medijima smo, eto koliko se priča o tome, znači to se dešavalo prije 10 godina ili možda malo manje, završeno je i više se ne pominje, iako je posle toga recimo bilo milion šansi da se pomene, jer je protiv Duška Kneževića, koliko su one optužile za mobbing po osnovu i polnu diskriminaciju, podnijeto 10 optužnica i bilo je mnogo priča o njemu. Mislim da ni u jednom tekstu se nije pomenulo to da su njega zaposlene u Atlas televiziji optužile za mobbing i polnu diskriminaciju i radnu diskriminaciju. Tako da i mi zaboravljamo. Mislim da u svemu ovome što sad radimo i svemu što nas pogotovo ljudi u štampanim medijima koji imaju dnevnu traku zaboravljaju da se izbore i za sebe i za one neke slučajeve koje bi trebali svima da nam vise iznad glave kao opomena, i nadam se da će koleginice koje ulaze u ovo biti odlučne da stanu na kraj tome da se doživljava da žena može biti uspješna samo zato što ima među nogama vaginu, a ne nešto drugo.
Thank you, Jelena. Straight to the point once again, and I hope that at least we succeeded to bring that we will be there as a support in this endeavor. Zhaklin, can you be the next?
Yes. In all these years that I've worked and I have faced this topic, very important topics, I talk about sexuality and sexuality freedom for women. It's that what woman needs before of being active at having actions, it's support. They need to find support. They need to fight to identify other female leaders like them, other groups of interest, other feminists working in social media, maybe young girls who are in different cities who will try to have a voice or to organize themselves. Just try to identify them, try to find them, and be the leader of them. If nobody is organizing them, you can organize them. This is what I've done, like just identify other girls or other groups like mine, put them all together and try to support each other in every history or in every topics that we want to cover, or in every public big cases, or in every shows that is using misogynistic word or very bad behavior against minority, against women, against children. So this is what I have done. I've linked all the women together. I have a group of support. We are all, like, we don't have a name. We are just organized to meet each other virtually or physically. And so we support each other's work. If I cover a topic and I need some support, I ask them to support me, and the others do the same. So since I have this group, I feel more safe. And of course, if I choose a topic to talk about, I have other people to confront and other opinion. Also, since sometimes being in such aggressive and hate society, it makes you doubt about yourself. I need to link and to the support of people outside of Albania, in like European country, support from journalists who live in Berlin, who live also in Serbia, in other countries, who speak for themselves, who have your perception of life, of society, and who can give you support and to say to you that you are in the right road. So, speak up for yourself and don't be afraid and don't be scared, and just give a reason to your life and to your job and to your family and to your society. So sometimes we think that what we are doing, the contribute that we are giving, is just a small contribute, but if everybody gives a small contribute, this contribute will be bigger. So my advice is to find support, identify and link all the groups together and just organize them. You will be more safe working in terrain or in the newsroom.
Thank you very much, Zhaklin. I personally agree 100% with all that you basically said about the support. I would just like to mention one action, and then the fact that you mentioned that the diversity of the support is also important. It's important that women support women, and that is something that is part of the core feministic action, but it is also important to have diverse support towards the female issue, because world that is fair and just towards women is fairer and juster world for everyone, basically. So, and I also wanted to emphasize one thing. When we had an action, Novinarke ne kleče, which was basically organized in Serbia, and it was linked with the basically relation of the authorities towards female journalists and how they're basically mistreating them, how they are addressing them in the press conferences, how they are being how they use misogyny, how they have sexist comments on when they want to discredit the journalists' work, they usually use sexism and misogyny. And at that point, a minister basically offended a journalist, and then there was, let's say, how we resist to all these kind of things. Then there was action that gathered many of the activists, not just feminist organizations, but many other organizations, that was titled Novinarke ne kleče, where we basically tried to confront to this, let's say, pattern of behavior that a minister, one of the ministers in Serbia, tried to normalize as a normal behavior and normal way how we address journalists. I will now give the word to Natalija to answer this part that we were basically referring to with our last question, which is what is the message for young journalists? Do you have any positive examples, and basically what would you advise them to do? And then I will open Q&A session.
Yes, I would definitely absolutely agree with everything Zhaklin said, because I think that when females, especially female journalists, work together, and I mean, not only support each other in the way Zhaklin just explained, like building a network or sharing the same values and kind of acquiring support in this regard, but also just like working together, like really, like there's so so many female stories or feminist issues, especially in the countries in the Balkans, that need to be told and that need to be heard and understood. And there is no better way for females to tell these stories, especially if they work together on them and put them up front, you know, make them put them on top of an agenda. A very positive experience I have is having literally working on an all-female team. It's an international team. I was picked to work with the group of female journalists. We were at the time covering some refugee related stories, especially when it comes to like what is it being, how it is being a female refugee or a mother or a pregnant mother giving birth in as a refugee. And that was really the story was great. The work was great. It's totally different when you approach female topics with such a strong female team and so on. So I can only recommend that. So definitely, you know, gather as much support as you can in regard to people supporting the female issues, but also try to not to look at other women as your competition, but, you know, try to make them your friends and partners in crime, so to say.
Natalija, thank you very much. I think that was like a very good closure of this wonderful discussion that we had. And thank you all like so much for being part of this. Now I would open the floor for everyone who basically listened to us for these 2 hours almost. So I tried to answer all the questions that I saw in chat and in the Q&A box. So if there are any additional questions, please raise your hand or write them down in the chat. Or if you would like to speak and to comment something, raise your hand and we will include you. Okay, I don't see anything now. Maybe we touched upon everything.
Yeah, there's another thing. It's about the collaboration with institutions and states. Usually here in Albania, when you talk about social problems, topics, beside all the gender problems, there's a lot of corruption problems. And so people are saying to you like, oh, you are covering this topic, but you are collaborating with the state. I think it's very important to talk about this. Like, you should respect your state and you should ask to your state and the institutions to be responsible for the actions they did. But in order to collaborate and to ask to them to be responsible, you need to talk with them and to communicate with them. So for me, I don't care if the PD party or the PS party. I pay the taxes and they should be responsible for their actions. So if I want my job or my right or my project to be a good project, and if I need to collaborate with them, I will collaborate with them. And when I have moments when I need to say to them that they need to take responsibility, to be responsible for their actions, I will do that. Like, collaborating with people who think or who have the perceptions different from you, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, you know. Trying to understand and trying to coordinate, even if you think in a different way, it's better than to hate each other or to be far away from each other. I think a connection, it's a better, it's a better way than refusing or hating them or just don't wanting to collaborate with institution, like different type of institutions, Tirana municipality, but also ministries. That's all.
Thank you, Zhaklin. Okay, since we do not have any kind of question, I will try to do the wrap up. You all feel free to interrupt me or to correct me if I understood something wrong. So basically the question of this discussion was, when will the journalists from the Balkans speak up? I think that based on on everything that we said, that means they will speak up when they feel ready to speak up. So I will definitely pull out that as the first conclusion. If they do not speak up soon, it's also our fault. It's our fault as societies, because we put so much pressure on women. We don't counter the challenges women are facing. Gender equality is still not reflected in all media. Okay, I see that we have now a question. Jelena Prodanovic. So Ivana, I'm now calling my colleague Ivana. So can we include Yasmina? So
yes, I will do it now.
I have turned on Yasmina, the option for Yasmina so she can talk.
Yasmina, I think you can talk now.
Yes.
Da li me čujete?
Yes.
Ok, ja ću pričati na srpskom da bi skratila, ako je moguće, to što imam da kažem i ostala sam ovako samo da me čujete zbog signala koji imam, da ne bi se poremetilo nešto. Hoću samo da kažem, malo pre tokom rasprave je spomenuto da se novinarke nađu u situaciji da, iako doživljavaju neprijatnosti na terenu, ako odbiju ako prijave to što im se dešava na terenu, da mogu doći u situaciju, ako sam dobro razumela, da dobiju otkaz zato što nisu u mogućnosti da obave posao koji im je dodeljen.
Navedeno kao jedan od primjera.
Jedan od primjera. Dakle, verujem da je istina i to je nažalost pokazatelj situacije takođe ovde na Balkanu. Ja sam isto tako, napisala sam tamo da ja nisam doživljavala u samoj redakciji, stvarno mi se nikada nije desilo nikakav oblik uznemiravanja, mizoginije. Zašto to kažem? Suština je u kakvoj redakciji radite. I naravno da su redakcije rezultat sredine u kojoj živimo, jer mi nismo osim sveta. Ali ako bih mogla da kažem mladim novinarkama, ako jednom krenete tim putem, da pristanite na kompromis, da pređete preko sebe, da biste uradili posao, teško ćete se vratiti nazad. Kako god, nadam se da me razumete šta hoću da kažem. Znači, prosto ne je ne i uvek je ne. Ako vi niste u stanju, ako ne možete uredniku da kažete da doživljavate neprijatnost od osobe na funkciji, neprijatnost pod znacima navoda, bilo kakav oblik uznemiravanja, ja ne znam iskreno zašto biste bili u toj redakciji. Jer ćete sutra to isto doživeti i u samoj redakciji. Mislim, možda ovo zvuči radikalno, opet kažem, nisam imala negativna iskustva u redakciji tog tipa, možda zato što sam i da kažem, birala, vodila računa gde radim. Verujem da je u mainstream medijima, možda je ovo predrasuda, to prisutnije i situacija jeste teška, svima nam treba posao, ali prosto smatram da ako jednom popustite i ne oduprete se, posle će vam biti sve teže i teže da stanete na crtu i da kažete ja to neću da radim zbog toga i toga, ili ćemo to da radimo tako da to izađe u javnost. Mislim da čak i novinarka doživi to što inače doživljavaju žene koje su suočene, koje su prinuđene da komuniciraju sa nekim koji je predmet intervjua ili razumete što hoću da kažem. Prosto...
Koja na poziciji moći.
Da, bilo kakvoj poziciji moći. Znači, prosto i ono jednostavno da koliko god je moguće da budu što je moguće profesionalnije u svom radu. Mislim da profesionalizam u jednom, ne znam, većem ili manjem broju da ipak odbija odbija insinuacije tog tipa i sad treba to sve uskladiti, ali prosto, eto, to sam samo htjela da kažem. Znam da je teško, znam da nije lako, doživet ćete neke druge neprijatnosti, možda vas proglase feministkinjom ili ne znam kako vas već nazove, ali prosto imajte na umu da ako jednom pristanete na neke stvari, posle toga će biti daleko, daleko teže u inače teškoj situaciji da se vratite tamo gde biste želeli da budete. Toliko hvala.
Hvala vam Jasmina puno. Mislim da ste upravo osvrnuli na jedan jako bitan deo koji se ovdje nekako provlačio sve vreme, ali nije bio ovako jasno iskomuniciran. Tako da hvala vam na tome. Okay, I will now switch to English and I will get back to the wrap up basically of this discussion. So the right time is when a person thinks that for her is the right time to speak about her own experience. What newsrooms and media can do is to have a responsible editors-in-chief who are basically coordinating and communicating the most with the journalists, with whom journalists feel that can speak openly about the challenges they faced. The next thing that I put, and we didn't maybe mention it enough, are the procedures within media and newsrooms, and basically which would enable that any journalist who works in the media is familiar with the harassment policy of the media where she works. So she's familiar with the steps, she knows that there is a procedure in case she is faced with something like this, how she can act. So she have the steps so she can basically act in accordance with those already designed steps in each media. I think that this speaks a lot about the media who has this sort of procedures. I think that this is also something that creates the trust between the female journalist and the media where she's basically working, when she knows that there are concrete steps that she can take if she feels that she's subjected to any sort of gender-based violence, any type of it. The next thing that I would also like to emphasize are informal groups and actions, which are basically linked with this support that we are constantly we were actually constantly mentioning during this debate. So there is a positive trend, if I understood correctly, of basically establishment of informal groups that are addressing like very openly and directly the problems that females face, that are basically feminist groups at the end of the day, which is extremely important for the message that they're basically sending also to the victims and to the society and to the institution. So this is some sort of a circle of support that is being created in the region, which is good. And there are also like very vocal individuals, such as all of you who were actually discussing all of this with us, who are actually some sort of a media for themselves, who can spread this message in a way further. Then the education, because we discussed a lot about the relationship between women and how are basically in media, when they cover violence against women, if there is if women involved in the story, they usually create women as opponents to one another. So this feminist education of women, of what their rights are, and what will teach them, what Jasmina said, how to stand for themselves in like very true meaning of that word. That is something that we are lacking in the region, to teach girls how to defend themselves, not with their fists in a way, but with their attitudes towards themselves and with their like sort of perception of their role as a woman in the society. So this is, and their basically position, and this is something that can in a way prevent all this situation that we were discussing. The fifth thing that I put here is resistance. And now in a very broad term, this resistance probably reflects on the part that Jasmina mentioned, that you are like speaking up when you see injustice, that you are reacting on time, that you are trying to resist to anything that is basically directed towards you based on your gender and just because of the fact that you are a woman, and to basically address very openly unequal treatment within your own media newsroom or when you are working outside with someone. So to have your own limits and borders, and that you are not afraid to communicate them with others. So this is also something that is very important. And the sixth thing is like professionalism as such, to be professional, to be dedicated to your work, to always know basically who you are and what are you doing to improve yourself, to work on yourself in a professional way. And that will for sure create some new, let's say, self-preserving mechanism within a journalist, how to counter the things that are coming from the outside. And seventh thing that I would add is that if any sort of the attack or assault happens, journalist is not the one to blame. So it doesn't matter if she dressed in a way that it's not in accordance with the traditional concept of how women should look in public. The responsibility is always on the attacker. And this is something that is extremely important. And then we are going then back to that support circle that will empower victim in this situation, and many other steps that we already mentioned. Thank you all for being here with us for the whole 2 hours and 8 minutes. I hope that we opened some new questions, that we shared some interesting examples and perspectives. I hope also that we offered some answers. And I would now stop here, and I would like before that to thank all my colleagues from BIRN who organized this. I would like to thank other partners on the Media for All project, and I would like to thank Leila for giving us that excellent introduction. And at the end of the day, the biggest thanks goes to all of you who actually talked with me today, to Natalija, Dafina, Jelena, and Zhaklin. Thank you very much for taking your time, for sharing your valuable experience, for sharing your perspectives and your views, and basically for being willing to speak up for all those who probably cannot or are not currently at that stage of their life. Thank you. So I don't know if my colleague Ivana Drakic would like to add something, or do we have any kind of procedures now for for ending this meeting?
We don't. Sofia, I just wanted to also thanks everybody and to say that we will post the news about the event with the conclusions on BIRN's website and Balkan Insight. And thanks everybody. It was really great.
Thank you. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for having us.